All right, welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating fable. It's called The Treasure of the Useful Man. And, it's this incredibly powerful story centered around a bustling market, a totally mysterious bag, and a pretty dramatic clash between two entirely different ideas of what it means to be wealthy. So let's just jump right in. But before we actually set foot in that lively morning market from our story, I want you to ask yourself something. How do we actually measure the value of what someone brings to the table? I mean, is it just their bank account? Is it the clothes on their back? Or is it something much deeper than that? Just kind of keep that in the back of your mind as we go through things today.
So, part one of our story, the boy and the bag. This all kicks off in this incredibly noisy, chaotic market. The text paints this super vivid picture, right? You've got shouting farmers, kids running absolutely everywhere, people loudly haggling over vegetables. It's a lot. And right smack in the middle of all this chaos, we are introduced to this huge, stark contrast between two very different people.
It's the perfect setup for our central conflict. On one side, you have Ethan. He's this young boy wearing old, worn-out clothes, literally walking around in shoes with holes in them, and he's just carrying this mysterious, beat-up brown cloth bag slung over his shoulder. Then, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, we've got Victor. Victor is a wealthy, incredibly judgmental shop owner. In fact, he runs the absolute largest store in the entire town. And, as you might expect, Victor immediately judges Ethan based purely on how he looks. He actually laughs out loud, openly mocking the poor kid right in front of the whole crowd. He points at Ethan's worn-out stuff and basically demands to know what kind of useless junk he could possibly be lugging around. He literally yells out, "What do you carry in that old bag? Stones? Old clothes? Or just your dreams?" Ouch.
But here is what's truly fascinating. Think about how you'd react in that situation. Instead of getting angry or, just running away totally embarrassed, Ethan is so calm. He just looks down at his bag and replies with three very simple words: "My greatest treasure." Now Victor just loses it. He laughs even harder and aggressively demands that Ethan show this so-called treasure to the crowd. But Ethan? He just politely refuses and says, "Not today."
Of course, Victor proudly announces to everyone that the boy's lying. And unfortunately, most of the crowd just walks away believing the rich guy. But there is this one kind old woman who stays behind. She clearly sees Ethan's quiet dignity. She actually hands him a piece of bread and shares this really touching sentiment. She tells him, "I don't know what's inside your bag, but I know what's inside your heart."
So days go by, and Victor just won't let it go. He continues this relentless mockery every single time he sees the boy. And all of this totally uncalled for public teasing really just builds up the suspense around the main mystery hanging over the whole market. I mean, we really have to stop and ask, what on earth is actually inside that beat-up old brown bag? Well, heading into part two, the sudden market storm. The answer to that question arrives totally out of nowhere one afternoon. The usual everyday hustle and bustle of the market gets violently interrupted. We're talking a sudden, incredibly dangerous change in the weather.
Just look at how fast this crisis actually escalates as the storm tears through the market. First, these really dark clouds gather in the afternoon. Then, literally minutes later, heavy rain and massive winds hit. Moments after that, the wooden stalls start collapsing, boxes are flying everywhere, and then, mere seconds later, complete and absolute panic sets in, because a little girl gets trapped underneath a broken cart. Okay, part 3. The real treasure revealed. The market is an absolute, total chaos. And right here is where the entire dynamic completely flips upside down. The supposedly powerful, wealthy Victor, he's standing there completely frozen in fear. He is literally useless in this moment. But Ethan, the poorest boy in the entire market, he drops that mysterious bag and immediately springs right into action.
Ethan, finally, after all this time, unzips that bag. And suddenly, the crowd realizes his so-called treasure isn't money, it isn't gold or fancy clothes. No, it's this incredibly comprehensive set of practical, life-saving tools that are designed entirely to help other people. We're talking a full first aid kit, warm blankets, clean water, medicine, food, a flashlight, some rope, and a bunch of small hand tools.
And without wasting a single second, Ethan puts this carefully curated stash to work. It's amazing. First, he pulls that trapped little girl out from under the broken cart. He cleans up her wounds, wraps her safely in a blanket. Then, he's off helping a fallen old man, passing out food to these terrified hungry kids, and he even manages to use his rope to tie up and stop a cart that was rolling out of control downhill.
Think about this. For 2 solid hours, this kid, the one walking around in torn shoes, works tirelessly. He is everywhere, helping literally anyone affected by the storm. And all the while, those supposedly powerful, wealthy merchants, they're just standing around watching him in totally stunned silence.
Which brings us to part 4, the true meaning of wealth. So the storm eventually passes, right? And this heavy silence falls over the destroyed market. A completely shell-shocked Victor slowly walks up to Ethan. He finally has to confront the reality of what he just witnessed. He looks at the boy, then looks at the bag, and just quietly admits, "I thought you were poor." And Ethan? He just smiles and says, "I am."
Now Victor is just completely baffled. He has to ask, why on earth would a poor boy carry around all these supplies for other people instead of keeping things for himself? Ethan gently closes up his bag and shares this incredibly profound piece of advice that his father passed down to him. He says, if you cannot become the richest person, become the most useful person. Wow.
The sheer impact of Ethan's quiet preparedness and honestly, his bravery, it just fundamentally breaks through to this arrogant businessman. Standing there hearing those words in the quiet aftermath of the destruction, Victor actually lowers his head. He feels this immense, deep shame for how he judged Ethan before. Because, let's face it, it is a brutal reminder of exactly how useless financial wealth is in moments that actually demand real, human action.
Fast forward to the very next morning. Victor actually places a brand new sign right outside his massive shop. It's a complete public admission of his huge mistake and really the embrace of an entirely new worldview. The sign boldly says, "Kindness is worth more than wealth." And the story goes that from that day forward, nobody in that market ever judged Ethan, or anyone else for that matter, by the clothes on their back ever again. Looking back at this whole incredible fable, we're really left with these 3 powerful takeaways that totally reframe how we evaluate the people around us. Number 1, obviously, never judge a person by their appearance. 2, a simple, beaten-up bag might actually carry a lot more real-world value than the most expensive luxury suitcase. And finally, true wealth isn't measured by a bank balance. It's measured by your kindness. So as we go ahead and wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with the exact question that the original story poses. What do you think was the real treasure inside Ethan's bag? Was it the literal tools and the bandages? Or was it actually the heart and the character of the boy carrying them? Take a second to think about what truly holds value in your own life. Thanks so much for joining me today, and as always, stay curious.